The wheels of the stagecoach had stopped turning 3 hours ago, but Catherine Montgomery could still feel them grinding against the earth, could still taste the dust that had coated her throat since leaving Tucson. She pressed her back against a boulder, trying to make herself small in the gathering darkness of the Arizona desert. The other passengers had scattered when the Apache raiders appeared. She'd seen the driver fall first, an arrow sprouting from his chest like some terrible flower. Now there was only silence and the sound of her own breathing, too loud in the emptiness. Her silk dress, imported from Paris and chosen by her mother for the wedding that would never happen, was torn at the hem and stained with blood not her own. Thank God. But from the elderly woman who'd been sitting beside her when the attack came. Catherine had tried to help, but the woman's eyes had gone glassy before she could do anything more than press her hands against the wound. The wedding ring, that heavy ornate thing that Charles Whitmore had slipped onto her finger at their engagement party, cut into her palm where she clutched it. She'd torn it off at the train station in Boston, standing on the platform with her trunk already loaded, her mother's shrieks still echoing behind her. You cannot simply leave. Think of your father's position. Think of what people will say. But Catherine had thought only of Charles's hand around her throat the night before, his whiskey breath hot against her ear as he explained exactly how a wife should behave. His father, the lieutenant governor, had laughed from his armchair. The boy's just eager. Miss Montgomery, you'll learn to appreciate a firm hand. She'd taken the first train west with only her jewelry box and a leather purse containing the gold coins she'd stolen from her father's study. No plan beyond escape. Beyond breathing air that didn't smell of cigars and promises that felt like prison bars. And now she would die here, in this alien landscape of red rock and thorny plants she couldn't name. And they would find her body and ship it back to Boston in a pine box. Her mother would dress her corpse in white and tell everyone she'd died of consumption while visiting a cousin. Charles would stand at her funeral and speak of lost love, and no one would ever know the truth. A pebble skittered across the ground. Catherine's breath caught. The Apache had left hours ago, taking the horses and anything of value from the overturned coach, but perhaps they'd returned. She pressed herself harder against the rock, wishing she could melt into it, become part of this unforgiving landscape. Boots, slow, deliberate steps on the hard-packed earth, not the soft tread of moccasins, but the heavy sound of worn leather and spurs that jingled faintly with each step. I know you're there. The voice was low, roughened by tobacco and desert wind. Saw you from the ridge. You can come out, or I can come get you. But one way's gonna be easier on both of us. Catherine's fingers found a sharp rock. It wasn't much, but it was something. Stay back. A laugh, short and without humor. Lady, if I wanted to hurt you, you'd already be hurt. I'm guessing you were on that stage. Saw what was left of it about a mile back. Are you a lawman? No. The footsteps came closer. And if I were you, I'd stop hoping for one. Nearest sheriff is 3 days' ride, assuming you know which direction to go, which you don't. He stepped into view then, silhouetted against the dying light, tall, lean, with a week's worth of beard and clothes that had seen better days. A revolver hung low on his hip, and a rifle was slung across his back. His hat was pulled low, but she could see his eyes gray like the sky before a storm. Name's Elias Cade, he said, and something in the way he said it, like he was testing the weight of it, made her skin prickle. And you're about 6 hours from dying of thirst. Maybe less if you keep breathing hard like that. I have money. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. In Boston. My father... Your father's in Boston, and you're in Arizona territory. He crouched down, still keeping distance between them, and she could see his face better now. Sunburned, weathered, with a scar that ran from his left eyebrow into his hairline. What I'm offering is water, some food, and a place to sleep that isn't crawling with scorpions. What you do after that is your business. Why would you help me? He was quiet for a moment, studying her. Because I've got rules. Don't hurt women, don't hurt kids. Don't kill unless someone's trying to kill me first. Simple as that. Are you an outlaw? Does it matter? He stood, brushed dust from his knees. You can stay here and be dead by morning. Or you can come with me and maybe live long enough to figure out your next move. Choose quick, I'm not much for standing still. Catherine looked at the desert stretching endlessly in every direction. At the overturned stagecoach in the distance that looked like the skeleton of some prehistoric beast. She thought of Charles, of her mother, of the life that had been closing around her like a fist. Then she looked at this stranger with his scarred face and steady eyes, who offered nothing but survival. She dropped the rock and stood on shaking legs. I can pay you for your help. Keep your money. He turned and started walking. Can't eat gold out here anyway. Catherine followed, her torn dress catching on the sparse vegetation. He led her to where a black horse waited, patient as stone. Without asking, he lifted her into the saddle, his hands careful, impersonal, then swung up behind her. What's your name? He asked as they started moving. Catherine? She hesitated, then added, Catherine Turner. The lie came easily. Montgomery was a name that opened doors in Boston, but out here it meant nothing. Well, Catherine Turner, he said, and she could hear something like amusement in his voice. Welcome to the territory. Try not to die on me, I've got enough problems without adding a corpse to the list. They rode in silence as the last light faded from the sky. Catherine had never seen stars like this, thousands upon thousands, so bright they seemed close enough to touch. The desert that had seemed so hostile in daylight took on an almost magical quality in the darkness. She could feel Elias behind her, solid and warm, could smell leather and gunpowder and something else sage. Maybe, or some other plant she didn't know. His arm came around her waist when the horse picked its way down a steep incline, steadying her, and she found herself leaning back against him without meaning to. Where are we going? She asked. Place I know, old mining shack. Nothing fancy, but it's got walls and a roof. And then you figure out if you're going back to wherever you came from or going somewhere else. But that's tomorrow's problem. They rode on through the night, and Catherine found herself thinking not of Boston or the life she'd fled, but of this moment, the stars overhead, the steady breathing of the horse, the stranger whose name might or might not be Elias Cade, but who had appeared out of the desert like something from the dime novels she'd hidden under her bed as a girl. She closed her eyes and let the rhythm of the ride carry her away from everything she'd known, toward something uncertain but alive with possibility. The shack materialized from the darkness like something conjured from dust and shadow. Catherine had dozed against Elias's shoulder for the last hour of the ride, but now she was fully awake, taking in the rough wooden structure that looked ready to collapse at the slightest provocation. Home, sweet home, Elias muttered, swinging down from the horse. He reached up to help her dismount, and Catherine's legs nearly buckled when her feet touched the ground. He steadied her with one hand, already moving to unsaddle the horse with the other. Inside, the shack was sparse but cleaner than she'd expected. A narrow cot against one wall, a table with two mismatched chairs, a few shelves holding canned goods and bottles she couldn't identify in the dim light. Elias lit a kerosene lamp, and the warm glow revealed more, a rifle propped in the corner, a deck of cards on the table, a wanted poster nailed to the wall. Catherine moved closer to read it, and her breath caught. Wanted Elias Cade, murder and robbery, $500 reward. The sketch was rough but recognizable, the same sharp jawline, the same scar cutting through his eyebrow. That's an old one, Elias said from behind her. He'd entered silently, carrying a bucket of water. They've upped it to 800 now. Should probably update my decor. Catherine turned to face him, acutely aware of how alone they were, how far from any help. You killed someone. Several someones. He set the bucket down, began rolling up his sleeves. You want the whole story, or just enough to decide whether to run screaming into the night. I want the truth. He studied her for a long moment, then shrugged out of his vest. That's when she saw it, the old bullet wound in his shoulder, scarred and puckered. Truth is, first man I killed was wearing a badge. Shot me and my partner in the back during what was supposed to be a peaceful surrender. Partner died. I didn't. Why did he shoot you? Because we were worth more dead than alive, and he figured no one would ask questions about two dead outlaws. Elias poured water into a basin, began washing the dust from his face and hands. Except I lived, and I remembered his face, and 6 months later I returned the favor. Catherine sank into one of the chairs, her mind struggling to reconcile this confession with the man who'd appeared from nowhere to save her. And the others? Men who tried to collect the bounty. Men who thought I had more gold than I did. Men who figured the world would be better off without Elias Cade breathing in it. He dried his face with a worn cloth. Watching her. Still feel safe accepting help from a murderer. You could have left me to die. Could have. He moved to the shelves, pulled down a can of beans and another of peaches. Could have done a lot of things, but like I said, I've got rules. He prepared a simple meal while Catherine watched, noting the efficiency of his movements, the way he kept his gun within reach even here. When he set a plate in front of her, she realized she couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten. "Thank you," she said, and meant it. They ate in silence for a while. Then Elias asked, "So who's Catherine Turner running from?" "What makes you think I'm running?" "Woman traveling alone in a wedding dress, expensive enough to feed a family for a year, either running from something or to something. And you don't have the look of someone heading toward happiness." Catherine set down her fork. "My fiancé, former fiancé, Charles Whitmore. His father is Lieutenant Governor of Massachusetts." At her startled look, Elias smiled grimly. "I can read. Miss Turner, or should I say Miss Montgomery, saw the story in a newspaper a couple weeks back. Big society wedding planned. Bride from one of Boston's finest families." Fear crept up her spine. "Are you going to—" "What ship you back for a reward? Doubt they're offering one. And even if they were—" He leaned back in his chair. "I told you. I've got rules." "Why should I believe you?" "Because you're still breathing." He stood, moved to a trunk in the corner. "Here." He tossed her a bundle of clothing. "These'll fit better than that dress for traveling. Belong to someone who won't be needing them anymore." Catherine held up the items: men's trousers, a cotton shirt, a vest. "These are men's clothes." "Welcome to the territory. Out here, staying alive matters more than staying proper." She changed behind a blanket he strung across the corner, grateful to be free of the corset and heavy silk. The clothes smelled of lye soap and desert air. When she emerged, Elias looked her over with a critical eye. "You'll pass. From a distance. Anyway." He handed her a hat. "Keep your hair up under this. Less likely to draw attention." "Where am I supposed to go?" "Copper Hollow's about 3 days' ride. Got a telegraph office, a stage line that actually runs on schedule, and folks who mind their own business if you mind yours." He moved to the cot, grabbed a blanket. "You take the bed. I'll sleep outside." "Wait." Catherine caught his arm as he passed, felt the muscle tense under her fingers. "Why are you helping me, really?" He looked down at her hand, then up at her face. In the lamplight, his gray eyes seemed almost silver. "Maybe because I know what it's like to have your whole life torn away. Maybe because I've done enough taking in this world and figured I was due to give something back. Or maybe—" He pulled free gently. "Maybe I just like the idea of Charles Whitmore waking up to find his property vanished into thin air." "I was never his property." "No." Elias moved to the door. "But he thought you were— And men like that, they don't handle losing well. You sure you want to stay disappeared? It's a hard life out here." Catherine thought of Charles's hands, of her mother's calculating eyes, of a future mapped out in dinner parties and charity functions, and producing heirs for a man who saw her as another acquisition. "I'm sure." "Then get some sleep. We'll work on your shooting tomorrow." "My what?" "You want to survive out here. You learn to defend yourself. I can teach you enough to make someone think twice. but you've got to want to learn." After he left, Catherine lay on the narrow cot, staring at the rough wooden ceiling. Through the thin walls, she could hear him settling in for the night, the creak of leather as he adjusted his gun belt, the scrape of a match as he lit a cigarette. She thought she wouldn't sleep, but exhaustion pulled her under. She dreamed of Boston, of her mother's horrified face, of Charles smashing things in his father's study. But then the dream shifted, and she was riding through the desert again. Stars wheeling overhead, and someone was holding her steady against the motion of the horse. When she woke just before dawn, she found a cup of coffee waiting on the table, still warm, and Elias's coat draped over her like an extra blanket. Through the window, she could see him with the horses, checking their hooves, talking to them in a low voice she couldn't quite hear. Catherine wrapped the coat around her shoulders and stepped outside. The desert morning was cold, the sky painted in shades of purple and gold. Elias looked up as she approached, and, for just a moment, before he schooled his expression back to its usual wariness, she saw something unexpected in his eyes. "Ready to learn how not to die?" he asked. "Ready as I'll ever be." He handed her a revolver, showed her how to hold it. "First rule, never point this at anything you don't intend to kill. Second rule, if you pull it, use it. Hesitation will get you buried." As the sun climbed higher, painting the red rocks in shades of fire, Catherine Montgomery learned to shoot, and with each squeeze of the trigger, each kick of the recoil, she felt the woman she'd been falling away like an old skin, revealing someone newer, harder, more real. Someone who might actually survive. The fever came on their third night in the shack. Catherine woke to find Elias thrashing on the floor where he'd been sleeping, his skin burning hot despite the desert cold. His shoulder, the old bullet wound, had turned an angry red, infection spreading like spilled ink under his skin. "No, no," he muttered in his delirium, hands grasping at invisible shapes. "Sarah, the baby, I'm sorry." Catherine knelt beside him, her hands steady despite the fear coursing through her. Her mother had insisted she learn basic nursing. A lady must know how to tend to her household, but those lessons in Boston's comfortable parlors hadn't prepared her for this. She peeled back his shirt, wincing at the inflamed wound. It had reopened somehow, maybe during their long rides, maybe from some movement she hadn't noticed. The edges were swollen, weeping. "I need you to stay still," she said, though he was beyond hearing. She found his saddlebags, searching until she located a bottle of whiskey and a knife. Her hands shook as she poured the alcohol over the blade. The next hours blurred together, cleaning the wound while Elias fought her in his fever dreams. Tearing strips from her ruined wedding dress, the silk was clean at least to make bandages. Forcing water between his cracked lips when he'd let her. "Don't let them take her," he said suddenly, his eyes open but unseeing. "She didn't know. Sarah didn't know about the gold." Catherine smoothed his hair back, felt the fever raging beneath his skin. "She's safe," she said, not knowing who Sarah was, but understanding the anguish in his voice. "No one's going to hurt her." He grabbed her wrist, his grip surprisingly strong. "They shot her anyway. Shot her while she was holding our boy. Said it was an accident. Said they thought she was reaching for a gun." His voice broke. "She was reaching for the baby. Just trying to protect the baby." The pieces fell together in Catherine's mind. A wife, a child, the reason a man might turn outlaw, might start down a path that ended with wanted posters and bullet scars. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." His grip loosened, and he sank back into fevered sleep. Catherine kept vigil through the night, bathing his face with cool water, checking the wound, praying to a God she wasn't sure listened to people in places like this. Dawn came gray and uncertain. Elias's fever had broken, but he was weak, barely conscious. Catherine made a decision that would have horrified her Boston self. She went through his things. In a hidden pocket of his saddlebag, she found it, a photograph, creased and worn from handling. A young woman with kind eyes holding an infant, both frozen in that serious way photographs demanded. On the back, in careful script, Sarah and James Cade, 1872. There were other things too. A marriage certificate, a deed to a small ranch in Colorado, a newspaper clipping about a tragic mistake during an arrest that left a blacksmith's family dead. Catherine put everything back exactly as she'd found it. When Elias finally woke properly near sunset, she was sitting beside him with a cup of broth made from their meager supplies. "How long?" His voice was rough, barely above a whisper. 2 days. The fever broke this morning." He tried to sit up, grimaced. "You should have left, taken the horse and—" "Drink." She held the cup to his lips, brooking no argument. "And don't insult me by suggesting I'd leave a sick man to die alone." He drank, watching her over the rim. "Most would." "I'm not most people." "No," he agreed quietly. "You're not." That night, with Elias propped against the wall and Catherine tending the small fire in the stove, they talked, not about his fever dreams or what she might have heard, but about other things. Small things at first. "First time I saw the ocean," Elias said. "I was 20. Couldn't believe anything could be that big. Just water stretching to forever. I used to sail with my father when I was young," Catherine offered, before he decided the business was more important than Sunday afternoons. "I loved the feeling of the wind, like you could go anywhere." "Why didn't you—" "Because young ladies don't sail away to adventure. They marry well and produce heirs and host tea parties." She poked at the fire. "I used to dream about stowing away on a ship bound for China or the Indies, seeing places where no one knew my name." "Careful what you wish for," Elias said, "not knowing anyone who knows your name. It's lonelier than you'd think." They sat in comfortable silence. Then Catherine asked, "Where were you really going before you found me?" "Nowhere, anywhere. Been drifting since—" He trailed off. "Since I had a reason to stop drifting." "You had a ranch once, in Colorado." He stiffened. "You went through my things. You were dying. I thought someone should know who to notify if—" She met his eyes steadily. "I'm sorry. About your family." His jaw worked. For a moment, she thought he'd order her out, wounded or not. Then something in him seemed to break, or maybe just bend. 3 years ago, he said quietly, "I was a blacksmith in Durango. Had a wife who could make flowers grow in desert sand and a boy who laughed like sunshine. Wasn't rich, but we had enough. Then someone robbed the bank, killed a guard. Sheriff decided it was me I'd shoot the horses they used, so I must have been in on it." He stared at the fire. "I was at home when they came. Sarah saw the rifles and panicked, grabbed James, tried to get to the root cellar where she thought they'd be safe. Deputy saw her running, yelled for her to stop. She didn't hear him over the baby crying. Or maybe she did and just knew stopping meant letting them take her boy's father." His voice went flat. "They shot her in the back. Baby, too. Said it was an accident. Said she should have stopped." Catherine felt tears on her cheeks. "Elias, Sheriff felt bad about it. Let me go. Said there wasn't enough evidence after all. But what was I supposed to do? Go back to my forge and pretend I didn't see my wife's blood every time I closed my eyes?" He laughed bitterly. "So I became what they said I was. Robbed that same bank 6 months later. Shot the deputy who killed them. Been running ever since." "It wasn't justice," Catherine said softly. "No, but it was something." He looked at her then. Really looked at her. "Now you know what kind of man you're keeping company with. A killer and a thief who couldn't protect the only things that mattered." Catherine moved closer, close enough to take his hand. His fingers were calloused, scarred from years of working hot metal. "I see a man who loved his family, who was failed by those meant to protect him, who's been carrying his grief alone for too long." He stared at their joined hands. "You don't know me. I know you could have ridden past that overturned stage, could have taken my gold and left me, could have done 100 things that would have been easier than helping me." She squeezed his fingers. I know you have rules in a world that broke all its rules for you. That has to count for something. Does it? It does to me. They sat like that as the fire burned low. Two broken people in a broken land, finding something neither had expected in the wreckage of their former lives. Not healing it was too soon for that, but understanding. A recognition of shared pain, different in detail but similar in depth. When Elias finally spoke again, his voice was steady. Town's still 3 days' ride, 4, maybe 5, with me moving slow. You could take the horse, make better time alone. I told you, Catherine said firmly. I'm not most people. We'll go together, or I won't go at all. He studied her face in the dying firelight. All right, Catherine Turner, together it is. Outside, a coyote howled at the moon, and the desert wind whispered secrets through the cracks in the walls. But inside the shack, for the first time in years, neither of them felt entirely alone. They left the shack on a morning when the sky threatened rain, clouds rolling in from the west like smoke. Elias had traded his horse for an old mule and a pack horse from a Mexican trader who asked no questions, understanding that sometimes a man needed to travel slow and unnoticed. Her name's Beatrice, Elias said, helping Catherine mount the mule. She's stubborn as sin but sure-footed. Won't throw you even if a rattler crosses her path. Catherine patted the mule's neck, feeling the coarse hair under her palm. Hello, Beatrice. We're going to be friends. You and I. Elias smiled, a real smile that transformed his face, made him look younger. She likes people who talk to her. My Sarah used to say. He stopped, the smile fading. Well, we should go. They rode single file through narrow canyons where the walls rose like cathedral spires. Elias led, his body still stiff from the infection but his eyes alert, scanning for danger. Catherine followed, learning to move with Beatrice's rolling gait, discovering muscles she didn't know she had. See that? Elias pointed to scratches on a flat rock. Apache sign. Means water's near. They've been using these trails for generations, long before people like us showed up claiming ownership of land that can't be owned. You sound like you admire them. I respect them. They're fighting for their home, their way of life. Can't fault a man for that, even if it means keeping my head on a swivel. By noon, the promised rain arrived, turning the desert into a different world. The smell of wet sage filled the air, and hidden flowers burst open as if they'd been waiting. Catherine tilted her face to the sky. Let the water wash away days of dust. First rule of desert rain. Elias called over the sound of drops on stone. Find high ground fast. These washes turn to rivers in minutes. They climbed to a ledge overlooking a dry creek bed. Within moments, water came rushing down the canyon, brown and violent, carrying branches and debris. Catherine watched in awe and terror as the flood roared past below them. Would have killed us, she said quietly. Maybe. But you learn to read the signs. Sky, wind, the way the animals act. He dismounted, checking his shoulder under the rain slicker. Come here. Time for another lesson. He taught her to read the landscape like a book, how to find water by following game trails, which plants could heal and which could kill, how to build a fire with wet wood. Catherine absorbed it all, surprising herself with her hunger for this knowledge. You're a quick study, Elias said as she successfully started a small fire under a rock overhang. I had to memorize sonnets and French conjugations. This is more useful. She held her hands to the flames. Tell me about the town. Copper Hollow. Used to be a mining camp. Copper played out years ago. But the town hung on. Stubborn folks, mostly. My friend Sam Reeves runs the saloon there. We rode together for a while after. He cleared his throat. After I left Colorado. He went straight. I didn't, but he'll help us. Us? Elias busied himself with the coffee pot. You need somewhere safe while you figure out your next move. Sam's got rooms above the saloon, and his wife Mary won't tolerate any nonsense from the customers. That night they camped near a spring where cottonwoods grew tall and grass sprouted in defiance of the surrounding desert. Elias showed Catherine how to hobble the animals, how to lay out bedrolls to avoid scorpions. "I never imagined I'd be doing this," she said, settling onto her blankets. The stars were coming out, brilliant in the clear air. 6 months ago, I was practicing piano and learning to manage servants. "Regrets?" She considered. No, I was dying there, just slowly, suffocating in silk and expectations. She turned to look at him across the fire. "What about you? Where were you heading before you found me?" "Mexico, maybe. Heard there's work for men with my skills down there. Or California. Somewhere the name Elias Cade doesn't mean anything." "You could change it." "It's the only thing I've got left that's mine," he said quietly. "The name Sarah called me. The name my boy would have learned to say." They rode through country that changed like chapters in a book. Red rock gave way to juniper forest, then back to open desert studded with tall saguaro cacti that looked like giants frozen mid-dance. Catherine learned to spot the dust of other riders from miles away, to recognize the difference between the cry of a hawk and the whistle riders used to signal each other. On the third day, her hands were raw from the reins. Her back ached, and her split skirt, another gift from the Mexican trader, was stiff with sweat and dust. But when Elias asked if she needed to rest, she shook her head. "I'm tougher than I look." "Never doubted it. But being tough and being stupid are different things. We'll rest at Willow Creek. Should reach it by evening." Willow Creek turned out to be a stage stop. Little more than a stone building and corrals. The station keeper, a grizzled man named Josiah, looked them over with suspicious eyes until Elias mentioned Sam's name. "Sam Reeves, hell. Why didn't you say so? Any friend of Sam's is welcome." He spat tobacco juice with remarkable accuracy. "You two looking for a meal wife's got stew on." They ate in the station's main room while Josiah regaled them with gossip from the territory. Apache raids to the south, gold strike rumors to the north, and Catherine's blood-chilled news from back east. "Heard there's some rich fellow from Boston sending Pinkerton men out here, looking for his runaway bride, offering $1,000 for information." Josiah laughed. $1,000, like any woman's worth that much trouble. Elias's expression didn't change. "Lot of money. What's she supposed to look like?" "Young, pretty, dark hair. But hell, that's half the women out here. Besides," he winked at Catherine, who'd pulled her hat low, "any woman smart enough to run from a man that desperate probably knows how to stay hidden." That night, in the small room Josiah's wife had prepared, Catherine sat on the narrow bed, fighting tears of frustration. $1,000. He'll find me. Men will do anything for that kind of money. Elias stood by the window, keeping watch. Not in Copper Hollow. Sam's town has its own way of handling outsiders who ask too many questions. "I can't put you in danger, either of you." He turned to her then. "You worried about my safety, lady. I've got an $800 bounty on my head, your Boston boy's pocket change compared to what's already chasing me. This is different. Charles has resources, connections, and I've got experience staying ahead of men like that." He moved closer, sat on the room's single chair. "Catherine, you need to decide something. You want to disappear. Really disappear. You've got to stop being Catherine Montgomery inside. She's got to die as sure as if they'd found her body by that stagecoach." "What do you mean?" "I mean, Catherine Turner can't just be a name you're trying on. She's got to be who you are, down to your bones. The way you walk, talk, think. Every time you flinch at crude language or expect someone to pull out your chair, you're telling the world you're not who you claim to be." Catherine absorbed this, understanding the truth of it. "Teach me how to be someone else. First lesson, stop apologizing for existing. Out here, taking up space isn't a sin. Second, look people in the eye. You've been trained to look down. Look away. That marks you as prey." He leaned forward. "And third, Hardest of all, stop caring so much what people think. Your life might depend on being willing to be improper. They practiced until late. Elias teaching her to walk with purpose instead of gliding, to speak without the musical lilt of finishing school, to sit like someone who'd earned their chair. Catherine felt like she was shedding skins, each lesson peeling away another layer of her old life. Better, Elias finally said. You might actually survive this. Survive? Catherine repeated. A month ago, I thought surviving meant enduring another tea party. Now, she gestured at her rough clothes, her calloused hands. Now I'm learning to disappear. Not disappear, Elias corrected. Transform, different thing entirely. The next morning they rose before dawn. Josiah's wife packed them food, clucking over Catherine like a worried hen. You take care, dear. World's hard enough without adding trouble to it. As they rode away, Catherine looked back at the station growing small in the distance. Each mile took her further from everything she'd known. But instead of fear, she felt something else. Freedom. Maybe, or just the absence of the weight she'd carried for so long. One more day, Elias said, pointing to mountains rising blue in the distance. Copper Hollow's just beyond that pass. Catherine straightened in her saddle, ignoring the aches and pains. One more day until the next chapter of whatever this was. One more day of lessons in becoming someone new. Beatrice plodded on, steady and reliable, carrying her toward a future Catherine Montgomery could never have imagined. But Catherine Turner, she was learning that woman could imagine anything, even happiness. Copper Hollow sprawled in a valley between two ridges, looking like it had been dropped from heaven and forgotten. The main street was wide enough for 2 wagons to pass, lined with buildings that leaned on each other like drunks after a long night. Catherine counted 3 saloons, a general store, a hotel that had seen better decades, and a surprising number of businesses that seemed to thrive despite the town's worn appearance. There, Elias pointed to a 2-story building painted an optimistic shade of green. The Desert Rose, Sam's place. They hitched their animals outside and entered through bat-wing doors into a world of tobacco smoke and morning whiskey. The few patrons looked up, assessed them with practiced eyes, then returned to their cards and drinks. Elias Cade. The voice came from behind the bar, a man built like a barrel with arms like ham hocks and the brightest red hair Catherine had ever seen. You sorry son of a gun. Sam. Elias moved forward, and the 2 men clasped hands over the bar. This is Miss Turner. She needs a place to stay and work if you've got it. Sam Reeves studied Catherine with shrewd blue eyes. Work. What kind of work can a lady like? He stopped, really looking at her. The rough clothes, the sun-darkened skin, the way she stood. Ah, that kind of lady. Mary? He bellowed toward the back. Got someone you need to meet. Mary Reeves appeared like a force of nature, tall, broad-shouldered, with gray-streaked hair pulled back severely, and hands that looked capable of anything from kneading bread to breaking noses. She looked Catherine up and down once, nodded. You pour drinks or cook? Neither, but I can learn. Can you count? Yes. Read? Yes. Write clear enough for folks to understand? I believe so. Mary smiled, transforming her stern face. Then you can keep the books. Sam's got a head for business, but his writing looks like chicken scratching. Room upstairs, board included, $1 a day plus tips if you help serve when we're busy. Fair. Catherine glanced at Elias, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. More than fair. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Saturday nights get rough. You'll earn that $1. They gave her a room at the back of the 2nd floor, small but clean, with a window overlooking the alley and a door with a good lock. Elias carried up her few belongings, then stood awkwardly in the doorway. I'll be around, he said. Sam's got work for me at the smithy edge of town. The owner died last month, and they need someone to keep the forge running until they find a permanent replacement. You're staying, Catherine couldn't hide her surprise or the warmth that spread through her chest. For a while, he shifted his weight. Figure you might need, that is, until you're settled. Elias. She touched his arm. Thank you. He looked at her hand, then her face. Something passed between them, unnamed but real. Then he cleared his throat, stepped back. You need anything, Sam knows where to find me. The first week passed in a blur. Catherine learned to navigate the saloon's rhythms, quiet mornings when miners nursed coffee and hangovers, busy afternoons when travelers stopped between stages, wild evenings when the whole town seemed to crowd inside. Mary taught her to pour beer with just enough head, to count change quickly, to spot trouble before it started. See that one? Mary nodded toward a man at the corner table. Watch his left hand. Goes to his boot when he's thinking violence. And that one there cheats at cards, but only small amounts. We let him because he loses it all back at the faro table. Catherine absorbed it all, filing information away with the same dedication she'd once applied to memorizing poetry. The regulars began to accept her Miss Clara, the educated girl who'd shown up with that dangerous-looking fellow who'd taken over the smithy. Elias came in most evenings, taking his dinner at the end of the bar where he could watch the room. They'd developed a routine of sorts. She'd bring his whiskey without being asked. He'd leave coins that included a generous tip, and they'd exchange a few words that meant nothing and everything. Busy night, she'd say. Seems so, he'd reply. You managing? Learning to. It was a dance, careful and measured, neither acknowledging what simmered beneath the surface. The first Saturday night, Catherine understood what Mary had meant about earning her dollar. The saloon filled with miners, cowboys, drifters, and women in bright dresses who rented rooms by the hour upstairs. The noise was deafening. The crowd pressed close, and Catherine found herself behind the bar pouring drinks as fast as her hands could move. Hey there, pretty thing. A miner with more liquor than sense leaned across the bar, reaching for her. How much for a dance? I don't dance. Catherine stepped back, but he grabbed her wrist. Sure you do. Just need the right partner. The man's words cut off as Elias's hand clamped on his shoulder. Catherine hadn't even seen him move from his corner. The lady said she doesn't dance. Elias's voice was quiet, which somehow made it more frightening. Wasn't talking to you, friend. I'm not your friend. Elias's grip tightened. And you're going to let go of her arm before I break yours. The saloon had gone quiet, everyone watching. The miner looked around, saw no support in the crowd, and released Catherine's wrist. Didn't mean nothing by it. Then you won't mind apologizing to Miss Clara. The miner mumbled something that might have been an apology and slunk away. Conversation gradually resumed, but Catherine noticed how people looked at Elias differently now, how they gave him more space. You all right? He asked quietly. Yes, thank you. Her heart was still racing, but not entirely from fear. You didn't have to. Yes, I did. He returned to his corner, but she felt his eyes on her the rest of the night. Later, after closing, Sam poured 3 glasses of his good whiskey, one for himself, one for Elias, one for Catherine, to Miss Clara. Sam raised his glass. Who handled her first Saturday night better than most? And to Elias, who reminded folks why mannerly behavior pays. They drank, the whiskey burning away the last of Catherine's nerves. Mary had gone to bed, and the saloon felt different, empty, larger and smaller at the same time. He's sweet on you, Sam said to Catherine, ignoring Elias's glare. Known this man 4 years, never seen him step into a fight over a woman, not since. He stopped, glanced at Elias. Well, just saying. Sam, Elias's voice carried warning. What girl ought to know she's got a protector? Nothing wrong with that. Sam finished his drink. Stood. I'm going to bed. You two can lock up. Alone. The silence stretched between them. Catherine washed glasses while Elias checked the doors, turned down the lamps. They moved around each other carefully, maintaining distance, You don't have to protect me, Catherine finally said. I'm learning to handle myself. I know. Elias paused at the foot of the stairs. But knowing and letting some drunk grab you are different things. Is that what this is letting you? He turned to face her fully. What do you want me to say, Catherine? That seeing his hand on you made me want to put him through the window, that I spend half my time trying not to think about. He stopped, jaw tight. It doesn't matter what I want. Why not? Because you're a lady hiding from a life that didn't suit you, and I'm a killer with a price on his head. Because in a few months you'll figure out your next move, and it won't include... He gestured vaguely. Me. Catherine set down the glass she'd been drying, moved closer. What if it did? Don't. He backed toward the door. You're grateful. I helped you. Now you think you owe me something, but you don't. This isn't about owing... Good night, Catherine. He left before she could finish, the door closing with a finality that echoed in the empty room. Catherine stood alone among the tables and chairs, the lingering smell of tobacco and whiskey, and wondered how long they could maintain this careful distance. Outside, she heard Elias's footsteps pause on the boardwalk. For a moment, she thought he might come back. Then the steps resumed, fading into the night, leaving her with the weight of unspoken words and the growing certainty that Catherine Turner was falling for a man who wouldn't let himself fall back. The market day in Copper Hollow brought everyone from miles around. Farmers with vegetables, Apache women with baskets, Mexican traders with leather goods, all crowding the dusty street in a chaos of commerce and conversation. Catherine had come to buy supplies for the saloon, her list careful in Mary's precise handwriting. She was examining potatoes when she felt that prickle on the back of her neck that Elias had taught her meant danger. Across the market, a man in a black duster was watching her. Not the casual interest she'd grown used to, but the focused attention of a hunter who'd spotted prey. Catherine forced herself to continue shopping, moving naturally from stall to stall while keeping the man in her peripheral vision. He was young, maybe 25, with the kind of careful grooming that stood out in a town where most men considered a monthly bath sufficient. A bounty hunter. She'd learned to recognize the type. She paid for her purchases and started back toward the saloon, taking a deliberately indirect route. The man followed, maintaining distance but never losing sight of her. Catherine's heart hammered, but she kept her pace steady. Running would only confirm his suspicions. At the corner by the barber shop, she turned sharply into an alley. The bounty hunter quickened his pace, hand moving toward his gun. The shot came from above. The hunter's hat flew off. A neat hole punched through the crown. He spun, drawing his pistol, searching for the shooter. Next one goes through your head. Elias's voice came from the roof of the feed store. Drop the iron. The hunter hesitated. Another shot kicked up dust an inch from his boot. You deaf, I said drop it. The gun hit the dirt. The hunter raised his hand slowly. I'm not looking for you, Cade. This isn't your business. Elias swung down from the roof, landing soft as a cat despite the drop. His own gun never wavered. See, that's where you're wrong. Everything in this town is my business. She's worth $1,000. The Montgomery girl. Never heard of her. Elias moved closer. All I see is Miss Clara, who serves drinks at the Desert Rose and minds her own affairs. You must be confused. The hunter's eyes darted between them. You don't understand. Charles Whitmore's connected. He's got judges, senators. And I've got a .45 aimed at your skull. Elias cocked the hammer for emphasis. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to walk to the stage office and buy a ticket on the next coach out. North, south. I don't care, long as it's away from here. You can't just... Or, Elias continued as if he hadn't spoken. I can kill you right here. Self-defense. You drew on a woman. Sheriff won't even bother with paperwork. Catherine watched the calculations play across the hunter's face, the greed warring with self-preservation. Finally, survival won. This isn't over, he said. There'll be others. Let them come. Elias stepped back, gesturing with his gun. Move. They watched him walk toward the stage office, Elias keeping his gun drawn until the man disappeared inside. Only then did Catherine realize she was shaking. Thank you, she whispered. Don't. Elias's face was hard. This is just the beginning. He'll wire Whitmore soon as he reaches a telegraph. More will come. Then I should leave. No. The word came sharp, then softer. No, we need to end this. They were interrupted by Sam running toward them, red face flushed darker with exertion. Elias, that bounty man. Handled. Elias holstered his gun. But we need to talk. All of us. In the back room of the Desert Rose, Mary poured coffee while Sam paced. Catherine sat still, trying to process how quickly her carefully built new life was crumbling. We could hide her, Mary suggested. The old mine shafts. For how long? Elias shook his head. This Whitmore won't stop. Men like him never do when they think something's been taken from them. So what do we do? Sam asked. Elias was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful, measured. We make Catherine Turner official, legal. Give her a history that'll hold up in court if it comes to that. How? Marriage certificate, property records, witnesses who'll swear they've known her for years. He looked at Catherine. But it means more than just papers. It means becoming her completely, no going back. I made that choice when I left Boston. Catherine said, No. Elias leaned forward. This is different. This means if Whitmore himself shows up, if your mother comes looking, you look them in the eye and swear you've never heard of Catherine Montgomery. Can you do that? She thought of Charles's hands, of her mother's calculating eyes, of a life measured in china patterns and calling cards. Yes. There's another problem, Sam said slowly. A woman alone, even with papers, it's not as solid as... He trailed off, looking uncomfortable. As a married woman, Mary finished. Law's clear on that. Married woman's identity is tied to her husband's. Harder to challenge. The room went silent. Catherine felt heat rise in her cheeks, but forced herself to think practically. So, we create a husband, someone who died, or... Won't work. Elias's voice was flat. They'll check. Need someone real, someone who can stand in front of a judge if needed. Another silence. Heavier this time. Catherine understood what wasn't being said, what hung in the air like smoke. She looked at Elias, but he was staring at his coffee as if it held answers. I'll do it. Everyone turned. Elias hadn't moved, still studying his cup. Elias, Sam started. Makes sense. His voice stayed level, emotionless. I'm already using false papers. Adding a wife to them changes nothing for me, and I can protect her better if... He shrugged. If it's legal. Catherine's heart was doing something complicated in her chest. You don't have to... It's practical. He looked up then, his gray eyes unreadable. Nothing more. We do the paperwork, establish the story. And when it's safe, when Whitmore gives up or finds another obsession, we dissolve it. Simple. Simple. The words sat between them like a stone. When? Mary asked. Ever practical. Tomorrow. Judge Baker's in town for the murder trial. He'll do it for $50 and no questions. And after, Catherine managed to ask. After, we're Mr. and Mrs. Turner, running the smithy at the edge of town. Respectable folks who mind their business. Elias stood abruptly. I need to get back to work. He left without looking at anyone. Sam whistled low. Well, that was something. Mary smacked his arm. Hush. She turned to Catherine. You sure about this? Honey marriage, even a paper one. It's not nothing. Catherine thought about Elias's careful distance, the way he'd said practical like a shield. It's just paper, a legal fiction to keep me safe. Mary and Sam exchanged a look that said they weren't buying it, but neither pushed. That evening, Catherine found Elias at the smithy, hammering out horseshoes with more force than necessary. Sparks flew with each strike, illuminating his face in brief orange flashes. "You don't have to do this," she said. He didn't stop hammering. "Already decided. Out of obligation because you helped me and now feel responsible." The hammer paused mid-swing. "Does it matter why?" "Yes." He set the hammer down, wiped sweat from his forehead. "What do you want me to say, that the thought of another man claiming you makes me want to tear this town apart, that I lie awake thinking about?" He turned away. "It doesn't matter what I want. This is about keeping you safe. And after, when it's safe, then you go on to whatever life you were meant for. Find someone proper, someone who can give you things without blood on them." Catherine stepped closer. "What if I don't want someone proper? You don't know what you want. You're scared, grateful. Don't," her voice came sharp, "don't tell me what I feel. I've had men doing that my whole life." He looked at her then, really looked at her. "This isn't a fairy tale, Catherine. I'm not a prince, and this isn't a rescue. It's survival. I know exactly what it is." She met his gaze steadily. "The question is, do you—" They stood in the forge's heat, surrounded by tools of transformation metal becoming horseshoes, or becoming useful things. Tomorrow they would speak words that would transform them too, create a fiction that might become truth if they weren't careful. Or if they were. "Tomorrow, then," Elias finally said. "Tomorrow," Catherine agreed, and left him to his hammering. Each strike echoing in the gathering dusk like a heartbeat, like a promise, like the forging of something that might be stronger than either of them expected. The land at the edge of Copper Hollow looked like God's own joke, 15 acres of rocks, scrub brush, and soil so thin you could see bedrock in places. The previous owner had given up after 2 failed harvests and a broken well, but standing there with the deed in her hand, Catherine saw possibility. "It's not much," Elias said, squinting against the morning sun. They'd been married 3 months now. The paper kind of married where they kept separate rooms and careful distance. Soil's barely worth spitting on. My grandmother grew roses and worse. Catherine walked the boundary, noting where erosion had carved channels, where sparse grass suggested deeper earth. "We just need to be smarter than the land." He followed her, skeptical but willing. They'd developed this rhythm, her dreaming, him grounding those dreams in reality, both of them finding a middle way that worked. The smithy brought in steady money, and Catherine still kept books at the Desert Rose 3 nights a week, enough to live on, enough to save a little. "We could build there." She pointed to a flat area protected by a rise. "Small at first, just enough for us." The us hung in the air. They hadn't talked about what would happen when the danger passed, when Charles Whitmore presumably found some other woman to obsess over. 6 months, Elias had said originally, maybe a year, but 3 months in. Neither had mentioned dissolving their practical arrangement. "Need water first," Elias said. "Can't build anything without water." They spent weeks searching for it. Elias borrowed divining rods from an old Mexican who swore by them, but found nothing. Catherine studied the land, watched where the rabbits went in the early morning, where the few hardy plants grew greenest. Finally, she led him to a depression near a cluster of cottonwood saplings. "Here," she said. "Trees don't mean water, not always." "No, but look at the stones." She knelt, brushing away sand to reveal smooth river rocks. "Water flowed here once, might still, deeper down." They dug for 3 days. Elias's back screamed from the work. His hands blistered inside work gloves. Catherine hauled buckets of earth until her arms shook. On the 3rd day, when they were 8 feet down and ready to quit, the soil changed. Darker, damp. "I'll be damned," Elias muttered. Water seeped slowly at first, then stronger. Not a gush, but steady. Enough. They sat at the edge of their hand-dug well, dirty and exhausted and grinning like fools. Catherine's hair had come loose from its pins, hanging in dusty strands. Elias had a smear of mud across his cheek. They looked nothing like the desperate woman and dangerous man who'd met in the desert months ago. "Now we can build," Catherine said. She looked at him sideways. "Unless you're planning to leave me to build a house alone." "Wouldn't dream of it, Mrs. Turner." The formal address had become their small joke, a way of acknowledging the legal fiction while maintaining safe distance. But sometimes, like now, it felt like something else, a trying on of possibility. They started with one room, adding as they could afford materials. Elias taught her to mix adobe, to lay blocks straight, to frame windows that would catch morning light but not afternoon heat. Catherine learned to swing a hammer without hitting her thumb, to measure twice and cut once, to curse creatively when things went wrong. Sam and Mary came to help on weekends, bringing food and gossip from town. Other neighbors pitched in too, the Hendersons from the next plot over. Old Jorge and his sons who ran goats on the hillside. This was how it worked out here. Catherine learned. People helped because someday they'd need help too. "Never seen Elias look so settled," Mary said one afternoon, watching him teach Catherine to split shingles. "Man's actually humming." "He hums when he works," Catherine said absently, then caught Mary's knowing look. "It doesn't mean anything." "Sure, honey. And I suppose it doesn't mean anything that he built that kitchen window exactly the height you mentioned liking, or that he rides all the way to Tucson for that tea you favor." Catherine busied herself with the water bucket. "We're partners. Partners notice things." "Uh-huh." The house grew slowly. A bedroom, a kitchen, a small parlor. Nothing fancy, but solid, real. Catherine planted a garden with seeds Mary gave her, coaxing beans and squash from the reluctant soil. Elias built furniture in the evenings, a table, chairs, a bed frame that he set up in the bedroom, then moved to the parlor without explanation. "I'll take the parlor," he said that first night in the finished house. "You need proper rest." "Elias, it's better this way." But sometimes she'd wake to find a blanket tucked around her that hadn't been there when she fell asleep. Sometimes she'd catch him watching her work in the garden with an expression that made her chest tight. Sometimes their hands would brush passing dishes or tools, and the air would go electric between them. The first harvest was pitiful, a few pounds of beans, some twisted carrots, squash that the rabbits got to first. But Catherine stood in her garden, holding those beans like treasure, and felt richer than she'd ever been in Boston. "We'll do better next season," she told Elias. "I've been reading about irrigation, about which plants grow well together. The Hendersons said they'd trade goat manure for blacksmith work. Planning ahead." He leaned against the porch post they'd set last week. "Thought you might be getting restless by now. Town life calling you back." "Is that what you think, that I'm playing at being a farmer's wife until something better comes along?" "Aren't you?" The question hit like cold water. Catherine set down her basket carefully. "Anger, building. Is that really what you think of me after everything? I think you're a lady born to silk sheets and servants who's making the best of a bad situation. I think when this is over, when it's safe, you'll remember who you really are." "Who I really am?" Catherine stepped closer. "I'll tell you who I am. I'm the woman who dug a well with her bare hands, who learned to shoot, to ride, to build a house from mud and stubbornness. I'm the woman who chose this life. Chose—" She stopped, swallowing the words that wanted to follow. "Chose what?" His voice had gone low, dangerous in its softness. "Nothing. Forget it." She turned to go, but he caught her arm. "No, say it." "Let me go, Elias." "Not until you say it." They stood frozen, his hand on her arm, her heart hammering so hard she was sure he could hear it. The late afternoon sun slanted across the porch, painting everything golden. "I chose you," she whispered. "God help me, I chose you." "Not because I had to, Not because I was desperate or grateful or any other excuse you've built in your head. I chose you because—" She pulled free, backing away. "But you've made it clear that was my mistake." She fled to the house, slamming the door harder than necessary. Through the window, she could see him still standing on the porch, hands clenched at his sides. That night, she lay in the bed he'd built, listening to him moving restlessly in the parlor. The house felt too small, too full of unspoken things. When she finally slept, she dreamed of water rising from deep places, of seeds sprouting in impossible soil, of transformations that couldn't be undone. In the morning, she found him already gone to the smithy, but on the kitchen table sat a cup of her favorite tea, still warm, and beside it a small wooden box he must have carved. Inside, nestled in cloth, were seeds. "For next season," read the note in his careful hand. No signature. But then, none was needed. Catherine held the seeds, these tiny promises of future harvests, and wondered if they were planning more than just a garden. If maybe, despite everything, they were planning a life. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, carried by a special courier who looked uncomfortable in the desert heat. Catherine was feeding the chickens when she saw him riding up the path, his Eastern clothes marking him as clearly as a brand. Mrs. Turner." He removed his hat, revealing pale skin that had never known real sun. "I have correspondence for a Miss Catherine Montgomery. I was told she might be found here." Catherine's hand tightened on the feed bucket. "You've been misinformed. I'm Clara Turner." The courier studied her face, comparing it to something, a photograph, perhaps. "My apologies, ma'am, but I'm instructed to leave this regardless." The sender was quite insistent that the lady in question would want to read it. He handed her an envelope of cream paper so fine she could feel the quality through her work gloves, her mother's seal pressed into burgundy wax. Catherine's hands didn't shake as she took it. She'd learned that much control, but her stomach churned. "Will there be a reply?" the courier asked. "I doubt it. Good day." She waited until his dust had settled before opening the letter. Her mother's precise script filled 2 pages. Asterisk Catherine. Asterisk. Asterisk. Your father is dead. A stroke. The physician said, brought on by the strain of recent events. I feel you should know that your disappearance contributed significantly to his decline. Asterisk. As his only heir, you stand to inherit considerable property and investments. The estate attorneys require your presence to settle matters. Should you fail to appear within 60 days, the state will consider you legally dead and dispose of assets accordingly. Asterisk, I trust even your current rebellious temperament will not blind you to practicality. A fortune awaits, enough to establish yourself independently wherever you've chosen to hide. All that's required is your signature and a brief appearance before the probate court. Asterisk Charles has married the Waverly girl. You need not fear encountering him. Asterisk your mother. Asterisk Margaret Montgomery. Asterisk. Asterisk postscript. I've enclosed a bank draft for travel expenses. Whatever you've become, you remain a Montgomery. Present yourself accordingly. Catherine read it twice, then sat heavily on the porch steps. Inside the envelope was a draft for $500 more money than most people in Copper Hollow saw in 5 years. That's how Elias found her an hour later when he came home for lunch. She hadn't moved, still clutching the letter and staring at nothing. "Catherine?" He swung down from his horse, concern sharp in his voice. "What's wrong?" Wordlessly, she handed him the letter. He read it, standing, his expression darkening with each line. Your father died 2 months ago, apparently. She didn't see fit to inform me immediately. Catherine laughed, a bitter sound. No, she waited until it was convenient, until she needed me to secure the money. Elias sat beside her, careful not to touch. It's a lot of money. It's a trap. She took the letter back, crumpled it. She knows exactly what she's doing, dangling freedom in front of me, knowing I'll have to go back. Be seen. Be Catherine Montgomery again, even for a day. You don't have to go. Don't I? She gestured at their small homestead. The struggling garden. The house that still needed so much work. That money could buy seed for next season, a new well, livestock. It could mean the difference between surviving and actually living. We're doing fine. Are we? Catherine stood, pacing. You work 14-hour days at the smithy. I mend clothes until my fingers bleed. We pretend beans and cornbread is a feast and that the roof doesn't leak and that... She stopped, breathing hard. That what? That this is enough. That we can build a real life on good intentions and stubborn hope. Elias was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood, went into the house, and returned with a small leather pouch. He emptied it onto the porch gold coins, silver dollars, a modest but real sum. $642, he said. Been saving since we got married. Figured we'd need it for, he shrugged. For whatever comes next. It's enough for seed, repairs, maybe some cattle come spring. We don't need Montgomery money. Catherine stared at the coins. You never said anything. Wanted it to be a surprise. For Christmas, maybe, or... He gathered the money back into the pouch. Doesn't matter. Point is, we don't need them. We don't need anything from that world. And if it's not about need, if it's about... She struggled for words. My father is dead. Whatever else he was my father. Don't I owe him? You owe him nothing. Elias's voice went hard. He was willing to sell you to Charles Whitmore for political connection. Man like that doesn't deserve your grief. You don't understand. It's not about deserving. It's about... She pressed her hands to her face. I ran away, like a child. And now he's dead, and I'll never be able to tell him why. Never be able to make him understand. He wouldn't have understood. Elias moved closer. Still not touching, but near enough she could feel his warmth. Men like that, they only understand ownership. You were property that declined to be owned. Nothing you could have said would have changed that. Catherine lowered her hands. How do you let it go? The anger, the need for them to see you, really see you. You don't? His gray eyes were steady on hers. You just learn to live with it, like a scar. Hurts less over time, but it's always there. They stood in the noon sun, the weight of their separate griefs mingling in the space between them. Then Catherine made a decision that would have shocked her Boston self. She tore the bank draft in half, then quarters, then smaller pieces that caught on the desert wind. Clara, she corrected. Catherine Montgomery's father is dead. Let her die with him. She looked at the letter, her mother's careful script. I should burn this too. Wait, Elias stayed her hand. Keep it. Not for them, but for you. Proof that you chose this, that you had a way back and didn't take it. That night, she folded the letter into her small box of important papers, their marriage certificate, the deed to the land, the first $1 she'd earned at the Desert Rose, documents of her new life, with one reminder of the old. Elias made dinner while she sat at their small table, watching him move around the kitchen he'd built to her specifications. He'd taken off his work shirt in the heat, and she could see the scars that mapped his history, the bullet wound, a burn from the forge, newer marks from building their home. I have something to tell you, she said suddenly. He paused in cutting bread. All right. I don't want an annulment. When it's safe, when enough time has passed, I don't want to dissolve this. The knife stopped moving entirely. Catherine? Clara. And I know what we agreed. I know this was supposed to be temporary, practical. But somewhere between that first well and planting beans and watching you build furniture you pretend is just functional when really it's beautiful. Somewhere in there. I stopped pretending. You're upset about your father. Not thinking clearly. Don't! She stood, moved around the table to face him. Don't diminish this. I'm thinking more clearly than I ever have. I choose this. I choose you. I choose us. You don't know what you're choosing. My life, my past. I know you wake up screaming sometimes. I know you still look over your shoulder even here. I know you think you don't deserve peace or happiness or— She took a breath. Or love. But you're wrong. The word hung between them, finally spoken. Love. Not gratitude or convenience or partnership. Love. Clara. Her chosen name was rough in his throat. I can't give you what you should have. Security, respectability. I have what I need. She reached up, touched the scar on his eyebrow, felt him shiver. I have a home we built together, work that matters. A man who sees me as myself, not as property or decoration or a means to an end. Do you understand how rare that is? How precious? He caught her hand, pressed it against his cheek. You deserve better than a broken-down outlaw playing at being a farmer. And you deserve better than a spoiled Boston girl playing at being strong. Good thing we're both more than that now. He kissed her then, finally, after months of careful distance and maintained boundaries. Kissed her like a man dying of thirst who'd finally found water. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. If we do this, he said quietly, it's real. No more separate rooms, no more pretending. Real marriage, real life, real consequences. I know. The danger might never fully pass. The running might not be over. I know. And you still— Yes. She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. Yes, to all of it. To whatever comes. Yes. That night, for the first time, they shared the bed he'd built. Outside. Coyotes called to each other across the desert, and the wind rattled the windows that needed better sealing. But inside was warmth and belonging and the beginning of something that transcended paper contracts or social expectations. Your mother will declare you dead, Elias said into the darkness. Good, Clara replied, finding his hand under the quilt. Let her— Catherine Montgomery is dead. Clara Turner has a life to live. And in the morning, when the sun painted the mountains pink and gold, they rose together to face whatever that life would bring. The letter from Boston sat in its box, a reminder of a world that no longer held any claim on either of them. They had chosen each other, chosen this place, chosen to build something from nothing but will and hope and love discovered in the most unlikely ground. The garden was still struggling. The house still needed work. The future remained uncertain. But for the first time since that night in the Boston train station, Clara Turner knew exactly where she belonged. The baby came with the spring rains, 2 years after Clara Turner had torn up a fortune and chosen love instead. She'd suspected for months, through the winter's scarce meals and the careful rationing of their stores. The knowing had come quietly, a fullness in her body, a tenderness, the way certain smells made her stomach turn. But she'd kept the secret close, waiting for the right moment that never seemed to come. Elias noticed. Of course, he'd always seen her too clearly. You're different, he said one morning, watching her struggle with the breakfast biscuits. You moving careful, like you're carrying eggs. Clara set down the pan, turned to face him. The words she'd practiced scattered like startled birds. I'm pregnant. The silence stretched until she could hear her own heartbeat. Elias stood frozen, coffee cup halfway to his mouth, and she saw it all pass across his face: joy, terror, the ghost of another woman who'd carried another child. How long? 4 months, maybe 5. She twisted her apron. I wasn't sure, and then I didn't know how to tell you. He crossed the kitchen in 2 strides, pulled her against him so carefully she might have been made of spun glass. She felt him trembling. A baby, he said into her hair. Our baby. Are you angry? Angry. He pulled back to look at her. Clara, I'm terrified. I'm amazed. His voice broke. I'm going to be a father again. Again. The word held all his grief, all his fear. Clara touched his face, felt the wetness on his cheeks. "This time will be different," she said. "You can't know that." "No, but I know you. I know us. And I know this child is already loved." They adjusted to the knowing slowly. Elias started working on a cradle in the evenings, carving each spindle with the focus of a man determined to build something unbreakable. Clara altered her dresses, planted an herb garden with plants Mary swore by for pregnancy and birth. The town embraced the news with the casual joy of people who'd seen too much death not to celebrate new life. Women stopped Clara in the market with advice, remedies, hand-knit blankets. Men slapped Elias on the back at the saloon, bought him drinks he barely touched. "First one's always the hardest," Sam said one evening. "But you two are made of stern stuff. You'll do fine." Elias's knuckles went white around his glass. Clara, watching from behind the bar where she still helped when she could, saw him struggle not to say, "It's not my first." As her belly grew round, so did their life. The garden finally yielded enough to sell at market. Elias's reputation as a blacksmith spread to neighboring towns. They bought 2 cows, a dozen more chickens, and started talking about adding another room to the house. "A proper bedroom for the baby," Elias said, sketching plans at the kitchen table, "with windows for morning light and—" "Elias," Clara covered his hand with hers, "it doesn't have to be perfect." "Yes," he said fiercely, "it does." She understood. Every board nailed, every wall raised was a promise asterisk. This child will be safe. This child will live. This time will be different. The past intruded only once, in the form of another letter. Not from Boston this time, but from a lawyer in Denver. Catherine Montgomery had been declared legally dead, her estate dispersed according to Massachusetts law. Her mother had included a note asterisk, "I hope you found what you were looking for." Clara burned both letters without regret. Labor came with the first real heat of summer. Clara had been hanging washing when the pain started, low and insistent. She'd finished the chores, not wanting to worry Elias until she was sure. But when he came home for lunch, he took one look at her and knew. "How long?" "Since morning." She gripped the table edge as another wave hit. "It's time." What followed was 18 hours of the hardest work Clara had ever done. Mary arrived with a midwife, a Mexican woman named Rosa who delivered half the babies in the territory. Elias was banished to the porch, where Sam kept him company and kept him from wearing a groove in the boards with his pacing. "You can hear if something's wrong," Sam said gently when Elias started toward the door for the 10th time. "Trust the women. They know what they're doing." Inside, Clara fought her own battle. The pain came in waves that threatened to drown her, but Rosa's calm voice anchored her. "Breathe, mija. Your body knows. Trust it." Between contractions, Clara could hear Elias pacing, heard Sam's steady attempts at distraction. She wanted to call out to him, tell him she was strong. She could do this, but another wave hit and all she could do was breathe. Dawn was painting the sky pink when Rosa finally said, "One more push. Your baby is almost here." Clara gave everything she had left, and then a cry, thin, angry, absolutely perfect. "A son," Rosa announced, cleaning the baby with practiced efficiency, small but fierce, like his mother. Clara reached for him with shaking arms. He was red and wrinkled and the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. Dark hair like Elias, her own stubborn chin already evident. "Let the father in," she managed to say. Elias burst through the door before Mary could even call him. He stopped at the threshold, taking in the scene, Clara exhausted but radiant, the bundle in her arms. "Come meet your son," Clara said softly. He approached slowly, as if in a dream. When he looked down at the baby, his face transformed with a wonder so pure it took Clara's breath away. "He's perfect," Elias whispered. "He's here and he's perfect and—" His voice broke entirely. "Hold him," Clara urged. Elias took the baby with hands that shook, cradled him like the most precious thing in the world. Their son opened his eyes gray like his father's and seemed to study the face above him with serious consideration. "Hello?" Elias said. "I'm your papa, and I promise—" He had to stop, swallow hard. "I promise I'll keep you safe. Always." They named him James Elias Turner James for the child who'd been lost. Elias for the man who'd found his way back to fatherhood. The birth certificate, signed by Judge Baker himself, made it official. One more document in Clara's box of important papers. One more proof of the life they'd built. The first weeks were a blur of feedings and diapers and learning this small person who'd joined their world. Elias barely slept, jumping at every cry, checking the baby's breathing a dozen times a night. "He's fine," Clara assured him repeatedly. "Babies are tougher than they look." But she understood his fear. Sometimes she'd wake to find him sitting by the cradle, just watching James sleep, as if his vigilance alone could guarantee their son's safety. The christening brought the whole town to the little church. James wore a gown Mary had sewn, white cotton with tiny blue flowers. When the pastor asked for the child's name, Elias spoke clear and strong. "James Elias Turner, son of Elias and Clara Turner." No hesitation, no qualifiers, just simple fact. That evening, as they sat on their porch with James sleeping between them, Clara asked, "Do you ever think about telling him about who we were before?" Elias considered, maybe someday, when he's old enough to understand that people can change, can become who they're meant to be instead of who they were born. He touched James's tiny fist, smiled when the baby gripped his finger. But not yet. For now, he just needs to know he's loved. "He'll know," Clara said. "Every day of his life. He'll know." The stars came out one by one. The same stars that had witnessed their first meeting, their careful dance toward trust, their choice to build something together. Now those stars looked down on a complete family, not perfect, not without scars, but whole in all the ways that mattered. "I want to show you something," Elias said suddenly. He went inside, returned with a worn envelope. From it, he pulled a document official-looking, with seals and signatures. "What is this?" "Bill of sale for the Hendersons' land. They're moving back east, want to sell quick, with what we've saved and what the harvest will bring." He met her eyes. 20 more acres, enough to really build something, a legacy for James. Clara studied the paper, then her husband's face. The wanted poster version of Elias Cade was long gone, replaced by this man-father, husband, farmer, dreamer of practical dreams. "Yes," she said, as she'd said to every important question he'd asked. "Yes, let's build something." James stirred between them, made a small sound of contentment. Above them, the desert stars continued their ancient dance. Witnesses to transformation, to love found in the most unlikely places, to families built from choice as much as blood. Clara Turner, who'd once been someone else, who'd once thought life was about meeting expectations and maintaining appearances, held her son in her husband's hand and knew that every difficult choice had led to this moment, this porch, this family, this life that was harder and richer and more real than anything Catherine Montgomery could have imagined. In the morning, they'd file the papers for the new land. They'd plan and plant and build, but tonight, they sat together in the completeness of the present moment. 3 souls who'd found each other across miles and years and impossible odds. The stranger arrived on a day when the wind carried the promise of rain. Clara was teaching James his letters at the kitchen table. He was 5 now, quick and curious as a magpie when she saw the rider approaching their gate. Something in his bearing, the expensive cut of his clothes despite the travel dust, made her stomach tighten. She'd learned to read danger in the set of shoulders, the way a man sat his horse. "James, go find your papa in the barn," she said quietly. "Tell him we have company." The boy ran off, leaving Clara to meet their visitor. She kept her hand near the shotgun by the door, another lesson learned in these years of building their life. The stranger dismounted, removed his hat to reveal steel-gray hair and a face that belonged in boardrooms. Not farmyards. Mrs. Turner. Yes. My name is William Hartley. I'm an attorney from Denver. He glanced around their property, the expanded house, the thriving garden, the cattle grazing in the distance. You've done well for yourselves. We work hard. What's your business here, Mr. Hartley? I'm looking for a woman, former client's daughter. She disappeared some years back, but there's been interest in locating her. Clara kept her expression neutral. Lot of folks disappear out here. Desert's good at keeping secrets. Indeed. Hartley studied her with lawyer's eyes. This woman would be about your age, well-educated, might have certain mannerisms that, well, breeding shows. Doesn't it even under rough clothes? Before Clara could respond, Elias emerged from the barn with James riding on his shoulders. He took in the scene, the stranger, Clara's rigid posture, and set the boy down gently. Go inside, son. Help your mother with lunch. But Papa... Mind me now. James went, casting curious looks back. Elias approached the stranger, and Clara saw him shift into the dangerous man he'd once been full-time. His hand rested casual-like near his hip, where she knew he kept a pistol. Help you with something. Hartley cleared his throat. As I was telling your wife, I'm looking for someone, Catherine Montgomery. Her mother recently passed, left a rather substantial inheritance. The estate requires proof of death or... He paused meaningfully. Or proof of life. Never heard the name, Elias said flatly. Now, you've had a long ride. There's water for your horse at the trough, and the road to town's clearly marked. Of course, but perhaps... Hartley reached into his coat, and Elias tensed. The lawyer slowly withdrew a photograph. Perhaps you've seen this woman. Clara didn't need to look. She knew what it would show herself at 20, dressed in silk and pearls, every inch the Boston society daughter. A lifetime ago. Lots of pretty women come through the territory, Elias said without glancing at the photo. Can't say as I remember them all. Hartley nodded slowly. I understand, but should you happen to remember anything, the inheritance is quite substantial. $800,000. Enough to transform lives. He looked pointedly at their modest farm. More than enough. We've got all we need, Clara said, finding her voice. Do you? Hartley's gaze swept over their property again. Forgive me, but I've done some research. This land's been drought-prone. Last year's cattle prices were down, and young James, their bright boy like that, deserves proper schooling. Wouldn't you say? Perhaps even university back east. Get off our land. Elias's voice had gone deadly quiet. I mean no offense. I'm simply pointing out that $800,000 could secure your son's future. All it would require is... I said get off our land. Hartley raised his hands peacefully. Very well. I'll be staying at the hotel in town for a few days. Should you remember anything? He mounted his horse, then turned back. Oh, and Mr. Turner, or should I say Mr. Cade. Amazing how thoroughly people can disappear out here, almost as if they become entirely different people. He rode off, leaving silence in his wake. That night, after James was asleep, Clara and Elias sat at their kitchen table with the lamp between them. The weight of the day's visit pressed down like summer heat. 800,000, Clara said quietly. That's more than... Don't, Elias's voice was sharp. Don't even think it. He knew who you were, who we both were. He was fishing. Lawyers are good at that. Clara stood, moved to the window where she could see stars scattered across the desert sky. What if he's not bluffing? What if he goes to the law? Then we deal with it. Elias joined her, his solid presence at her back. We've faced worse. Have we? We have James now. It's not just us anymore. Which is exactly why we don't take his bait. Elias turned her to face him. Clara, that money comes with strings. You'd have to go back. Be her again. Stand in court. Answer questions. And once they have you there. I know. She leaned into him, drew strength from his certainty. I know. The next morning brought Sam and Mary, grim-faced with news. That lawyer's been asking questions in town. Showing that photograph around, Fred at the telegraph office says he's been wiring back east regular. Most folks aren't talking, Mary added, but money has a way of loosening tongues. Clara felt the walls closing in, the past reaching out with grasping fingers. Then James ran in from feeding chickens, chattering about the eggs he'd found, and her resolve hardened. This was their life, their home, their truth. That evening, she made a decision. I need to go to town, she told Elias, to see him. Absolutely not. Elias, listen, he won't stop. Men like that never do. But maybe I can make him understand. They argued, but in the end, he knew she was right. The next morning, Clara put on her best dress, simple but clean, and rode to town with Elias beside her, both of them armed with more than just weapons. Hartley received them in his hotel room, unsurprised. Mrs. Turner, Mr. Turner, please, sit. We'll stand, Elias said. As you wish. Hartley spread papers on the small table. Shall we discuss terms? No terms, Clara said. Just truth. Yes. I was Catherine Montgomery. That woman is dead as surely as if you'd found her grave. The law might disagree. The law? Clara laughed. The law that would have let Charles Whitmore own me? The law that says a woman can't choose her own life? That law. The world has changed. Miss Montgomery. Women have more rights now. I'm not Miss Montgomery. Clara's voice rang with certainty. I'm Clara Turner, wife of Elias Turner, mother of James Turner. I milk cows and plant beans and teach my son his letters. I birth calves and mend fences and make a life with my hands instead of my name. And the money. Clara reached into her pocket, withdrew a folded paper. A letter. To whoever needs to hear it. Catherine Montgomery is dead. She died in the desert 7 years ago, unmourned and unneeded. Let her rest. Hartley read the letter slowly. This won't hold up in court. Then take it to court. Elias stepped forward. Drag it all out. Tell them how she ran from a marriage that would have killed her slow. Tell them about the years we've built here, the life we've made. See how that plays to a territorial jury who values grit over gold. The lawyer was quiet for a long moment. Then he gathered his papers, tucked Clara's letter among them. You understand what you're giving up? Nothing, Clara said. I'm giving up nothing that matters. Hartley studied them both, then nodded slowly. I'll file my report. Catherine Montgomery, confirmed dead, no survivors located. The estate will go to distant cousins who'll squander it within a generation. Why? Elias asked suspiciously. Because, Hartley smiled sadly. My own daughter ran west 15 years ago. I spent 5 years searching before I accepted she didn't want to be found. Sometimes, Mr. Turner, love means letting go. They left him there with his papers and his regrets. Outside, the sun was bright on the dusty street, and Clara felt lighter than she had in days. It's over, she said wonderingly. Really over? Is it? Elias helped her onto her horse. He could change his mind. The cousins could hire someone else. Let them. Clara looked back toward their farm, where James would be waiting with his 1,000 questions. We have a house, a name, and each other. That's enough. They rode home through countryside that had become as familiar as breathing. The mountains rose blue in the distance, eternal and unchanging. Hawks circled overhead, riding thermals toward heaven, and somewhere behind them, a lawyer from Denver was writing a report that would close the book on Catherine Montgomery forever. That night, Clara added Hartley's business card to her box of documents, one more piece of paper marking the boundaries of her chosen life. James helped her in the garden until sunset, his small hands careful with the tender plants. Elias worked on an addition to the barn, whistling tunelessly as he measured and cut. Normal things, everyday things, the things that made a life. After dinner, a neighbor stopped by with news of his daughter's engagement. They sat on the porch talking about weather and cattle prices and the new school teacher coming to town. No one mentioned lawyers or inheritances or the people they used to be. As the stars came out, James asked, "Papa, will you tell the story about how you met Mama?" Elias smiled, settling the boy on his lap. Well now, it was a dark night in the desert, and there was this stagecoach. Clara listened to the familiar tale, noting how it changed a little each time, how the dangers grew more dramatic, the rescue more daring, the love more inevitable. All stories did that, she supposed, became more true in the telling than they'd been in the living. "And then what?" James asked sleepily, though he knew the answer. "And then," Elias said, looking at Clara with eyes that still held wonder after all these years, "I traded my name for the chance to lie beside her, and it was the best trade I ever made." James was asleep before the story ended, carried to bed by his father, tucked in by his mother. Clara stood in the doorway watching her son sleep, this child who would never know the weight of being owned, who would grow up free under desert skies. "Any regrets?" Elias asked quietly, arms coming around her from behind. "Not one," Clara said, and meant it. "Not one single one." The night wind carried the scent of rain and growing things. Somewhere, coyotes sang to the moon, and in a small house on the edge of Copper Hollow, the Turner family slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that sometimes the greatest treasures couldn't be measured in dollars or deeds, but in the simple act of choosing love over everything else the world might offer. The morning would bring new challenges, new work, new possibilities, but tonight they had a home built by hand, a name chosen freely, and the absolute certainty that some trades, like freedom for fortune, like past for future, like a name for love, were worth making. And in the end, that was enough, more than enough. It was everything. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. I hope you enjoyed following Clara and Elias on their journey from that fateful meeting in the desert to building a life and family together. If you're listening to this tale, I'd love to know where you are, whether you're driving through your own desert roads, cozying up at home, or perhaps dreaming of your own adventures. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to Wild West Stories 1850 and hit that like button. And if you really want to help more people discover these tales of love, courage, and redemption in the Old West, please hit the hype button to boost this video. Your support means the world and helps keep these stories alive. Until next time, partners.